expecting our main speaker, Mr. Yusuf Serunkuma, to join the space shortly. Co-host Irene Sumari and every other person that will be on the space. You are very welcome. This is a recorded space, so everything shall discuss. Yeah, very good to see you, Mr. Yusuf. Very good to see you this evening. I'm going to make a speaker shortly. We start exactly 5 minutes from now. We just wait, and we shall start exactly 5 minutes from now. If you can, please share the link with your audience. And yeah, we shall start shortly. Thank you so much for honoring our invitation, sir. Yeah, guys, very good evening to everyone. We're starting in exactly 3 minutes from now. Let me try to make use of the speaker again. Guys, try to share the link if you can. Share it with your friends, your circles. We are starting soon, in just 2 minutes from now. Guys, you're welcome to the space. I see a couple of good people here: Cedric, John, Tony, Joshua. You're all welcome. We're starting in 2 minutes from now. Yeah, try to share the link if you can with your friends, your circles. We are starting shortly. This is a recorded space, so if you've missed anything, you'll be able to listen in later on. Yusuf, I'm trying to make you speaker. I don't know if you can see my invite and you can accept it and become speaker. I don't know if, can you guys hear me? Irene, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good. I'm trying to make Yusuf speaker, but I don't know. Yusuf, if you can hear me, please accept my invite. I'm trying to make speaker. Okay, guys, we are starting now. I don't know if Yusuf is still having a challenge becoming speaker. Let me try to invite him. But good evening, everyone. You're very welcome to the EATSpace. This is a people space, ordinary people coming together every week to discuss social and economic topics shaping the future of East Africa and Africa. And this topic today, the US recently concluded US Africa Summit 2022, is one of those topics, is one of those issues that's definitely going to shape the future of Africa economically here and there. So it's important for us to discuss and to understand, to weigh in on, really what are the implications of this summit and the summits that have happened before, where our leaders go and, have this big discussion, make these big deals, and we don't really see how it translates, to the ground where most of us exist. So we are joined by Mr. Yusuf Serunkuma, Dr. Yusuf Serunkuma. I think he will tell us more about his titles. However, he's still having a challenge becoming speaker. I don't know what the challenge is. Yeah, and my name is Frederick Kaskazini. I'm an entrepreneur and I'm passionate about East Africa and Africa. And my co-host Irene, you can introduce yourself as we try to make Yusuf the speaker.
Yes, thank you. My name is Irene Sumari. I'm also an entrepreneur. We do this every week. This is a space which is more based on enlightening, but also making people feel free to share their ideas on how they see issues happening on every topic that we put on. So karibuni sana on a space. This is a free space. If you feel like you want to ask a question, you can just request for a mic and then we will invite you. But for now, we'll be waiting for Yusuf to join the conversation so that we can start the space.
Okay, Yusuf has notified me that he's having a challenge becoming speaker. I think he's trying to work on it. I think we shall just wait a bit for him to work on his mic. Otherwise, this is the EATSpace. Like I said, here, you can feel free to use Swahili or English. It's how we run this space, and we have a goal of doing 50 spaces. Our goal is to reach 50 impactful spaces, and this is one of those 50 impactful spaces. Let's just wait on a bit. Just hold on. I think 2 minutes. Let's see if we can, help Yusuf work on his mic and become speaker. Okay. As we wait for Yusuf to work on his microphone and become speaker, we are joined by other other great people this evening, and I'm sure you all read the news, you all followed on social media and all other media outlets about the summit that was going on in the US. And just shortly as we wait, you could share your opinions of what you thought about the summit and how it made you feel, and you know uh, just basically your opinions. You can request to speak, and can allow you, can make you speaker. As we wait, you can share your opinions, guys.
Yes, as we wait for someone to share about the US African Summit, we just want to do a little review on what we had last week. We were talking to Collins on specifically on technology and how his journey has been, how he turned technology into an opportunity. And yeah, I'm sure most of us learned a lot from him. But if you missed that space, we have a YouTube channel where you can access all the recorded spaces we have been doing for the last 10 weeks. So yeah, karibuni sana. Feel free to share your ideas, your views on the topic that we're having tonight.
Hi guys, can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Yusuf.
Hey, my apologies, guys. It's a long time since I last did Twitter Spaces.
Good.
Yeah,
Finally, we have you. Good evening, Yusuf. Are
Good
you
evening.
good?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I should be good now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can hear us well?
I think so. Yeah, I was hearing everything you guys said, but I couldn't get
Okay.
my mic turned on. Yeah,
Okay, sure. Okay.
yeah.
You're very welcome to the space this evening.
Thank you, bro.
We shall start by inviting you to introduce yourself. Who is Yusuf Serunkuma? And are you Dr. Yusuf Serunkuma? I usually don't see you using that title. Just a bit of who you are, and uh, your story to where you've reached as a scholar, as a writer. We see a lot of your articles. Your story could, inspire someone on the space that really looks up to you. So yeah, I invite you to introduce yourself and just a bit of your story, and then we shall get moving.
Okay, thank you very much. Surprised you invited a stranger. I hope by the end of saying my introduction, you don't feel like, why did we invite this guy? Anyways, so I write a column in the Ugandan newspapers. I'm proud of that column more than anything else I've achieved. I write a column in the Observer newspaper, and I also write a couple of things. I'm always talking in the review of African political economy. I write a monthly column for the Pan African Review, which is based in Kigali. Occasionally, I write for the Elephant, which is based in Nairobi. I am a postdoctoral fellow at Martin Luther University in Halle-Wittenberg. That's a small town in eastern Germany. I am based at Makerere University. I masquerade as a playwright, written a small play, which is my way of biasing people to think about the world differently. It's called The Snake Farmers. What else? I recently put out a book, which is a collection of my writing on COVID-19 called Non-Essential Humans. So Non-Essential Humans, I'm very proud of the book because as we're reading the Twitter files nowadays, thanks to Elon Musk, I'm sorry for all the lefty liberals here. Thanks to Elon Musk, we're reading the Twitter files, and it appears that all of us who were skeptical about the entire COVID story could have been right. Right? And I felt it was so easy to tell that the COVID story had a problem with it, but it was very disturbing the ways in which media houses, especially in the region, went into it hook, line, and sinker, and were sort of repeating talking points of power. Even people that I felt could be critical or are known for being critical of power, there's a way they fell for the COVID narrative, which is not to say there was no COVID-19. There was absolutely COVID-19 as a pandemic. But our responses, especially us in sub-Saharan Africa, especially in Uganda, it was copy-pasting Europe, right? We were copy-pasting Europe, which I felt was really absurd. And for men like John Pombe Magufuli, who had a different view of things, were maligned so viciously in ways that were really strange. And yet countries such as Malawi, uh, small countries that you think, maybe would be towing the WHO line, hook, line, and sinker, had a different view of things, right? So I have a collection of aces, thanks to the Open Society Initiative, which anybody would put them together, published on Non-Essential Humans. So for all the listeners today, if you support this struggling Ugandan author, it will be very good. Copies of Non-Essential Humans are available. the Ugandan sailor called Mahiri Books, and you can have copies. I think it's an interesting read of my skepticism in my growth as a scholar and also columnist in Uganda. Isn't that not too much about my profile?
No. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's very interesting. It's very interesting, especially how passionate you are about, your work and what you write about. Very interesting. But then just before we get into the main topic, you talk about writing. I noticed that most, not just Ugandans, but East Africans and Africans don't read so much in this era. Um, what do you think can take people back into reading as much? And you as a person that writes, what keeps you going?
I'm a victim of the World Bank interest on the African continent. The combination of the World Bank and the IMF ruined part of my life, right? And my story is not unique. It's a story of almost every East African, of every African, right? So in the 1980s, our parents used to work for these uh, public enterprises, parastatals, which are owned by the public, which provided things such as electricity, fabrics, um, agricultural equipment. All these things were locally made, and these things were governments were run as businesses, if I could say it that way. And the World Bank and the IMF ruined our lives, right? So that ruin of our lives didn't stop at the physical ruin and the economic ruin. It also went into our awareness. You now have an African continent, which is largely a continent of compradors, right? Many of the lists that you see around the African continent, most of them, with office in NGOs and World Bank and just trying to work for the UN. These are compradors, right? They've given in to the narrative of the World Bank and the IMF, and I think this should take us into the next topic, the topic of this space, which is the summit. Even our politicians, if you look at our politicians right now, these are comprador intellectuals, right? These are people you don't think can stand on their feet or are able to mobilize the intellectual tools and the stamina, because it's one part mobilizing intellectual tools, but also having the stamina to stand up and be counted on the good side of history, right? As Franz Fanon has written in The Wretched of the Earth, we now have people who are able to be who are content to work as middlemen for Western capital, right? So, but as I drag on to this point of Western capital, it didn't stop at the ruin of the economy. It also ruined our education system. So right now, I don't know what's happening in Kenya or Tanzania, but I can tell so authoritatively in Uganda, it is the World Bank which is in charge of our curriculum, right? And they're pushing a narrative which says you need to train clerks and engineers and medical doctors. I mean, things which require just little cram work and then you're good to go. Things like history and political science and literature are being considered as less necessary in the education system, right? While the pursuit of having more engineers and doctors and clerks and carpenters and people who do those things which need these technical skills is very necessary, but we don't need to forget the idea that it is thought, it's critical analysis, it's opening your eyes to the wide world that moves nation states, right? So what has happened is that, we hand over our education system to the World Bank, right? I don't know. I'm not sure. You guys can tell me if it is any Kenyan in this place. You guys can tell me who is always revising the curriculum. Curriculums are revised with the support of the World Bank. The World Bank oftentimes brings in experts, Western experts, brings in white people to come and revise our curriculum, right? So in the end, they've pursued a process which ignores. And you remember what happened in 1980s when they said university education was luxury, right? So they started funding primary school and secondary school, and they said university education was luxury. But the university is meant to produce the next crop of thinkers and writers and radicals who question power and provide their compatriots with new discourse, right? So with turning things upside down, we went back to the colonial time. The colonists argued that you're not going to set up universities on the African continent because you're going to produce a crop of of liberation leaders, right? They took lessons from India because the Indian struggle was led by intellectuals, Ambedkar and Gandhis and all those people who were around the Gandhis and the Ambedkars. They said they couldn't do that in East Africa or in Africa. So this is why Makerere started as a technical college, right? They were content to produce folks who can read and write, but who cannot do much more than reading and writing, who can take instructions and execute assignments, but not those who can think. So what we've lost over the time is the thinking faculty. The department of thought has been given less consideration in the ways in which World Bank and IMF think about education in the African continent. And I should say, kudos to you guys who, through this sort of being surrounded, you still struggle and find
Yeah.
reading a curious engagement.
Yusuf, I don't know if you can hear me breaking a bit.
Yeah, I can hear. Am I breaking?
Yeah, you're breaking a bit. I think it's your network.
Probably. I'm in Uganda. Probably.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but you're also breaking.
Okay.
I hope you did. Yeah.
I'm also breaking.
Yeah, that's how I hear you.
It's crazy. But I can hear you clearly now. I think everyone else can also
Yeah.
hear you clearly.
Okay. It's
Yeah,
recovered now. At what point did you lose me?
What did you say?
At what point did you lose me?
No. I got you till the time I actually following. I think someone else hear you and was following.
Okay.
Yeah. So you were talking about education, and I think it also connects to the first question I had for you. You talk about in your article, Africa Puppet Summit. You talk about a world created Europe and USA. In one of the paragraphs, and if we can see the world is created by them, because even the platforms that we are using, devices that we largely come from. How then do we can our influence, as a people, through our leaders, to be able to make, economic decisions moving forward without necessarily always having to tag them along or some way, somehow involve them, in our destiny.
Did you pose a question?
Did you hear me?
I heard you, but I didn't hear the question properly.
You're breaking. Yeah, you will. Irene, can you hear Yusuf?
Yes,
I can
he's
hear
saying
you,
he
but
heard you, but he didn't get the question. So please repeat the
yeah,
question.
please.
Yeah. Okay. The question was, in your article, you write about a world created by Europe and USA, which clearly we can see all around us, right?
Yeah.
And even in the language thing. My question was, how can we move forward becoming independent from them, or is having to be part of our decision-making process economically and politically?
I don't know how what you mean by aspiring to become independent, right? Because right now we live in a sort of a Western modernity, and we have been conscripted to this modernity. We didn't choose to be part of this sort of Western colonial modernity. We've been conscripted to it, and there's no turning back, right? Of course, we can often find space in which we can exercise our agency, but it's difficult to turn back completely, right? That's that. I think you're not looking for something like total liberation, right? That's not going to happen. But what I think we can do is that within the spaces which we have, it is within those spaces that we can actually execute our agency. And what I write about in the space is that our leaders have downplayed the power they have in their hands. The power they have in their hand. If you watch the summit, if I can allow me to go into the summit rather quickly, when you read the speech by the U.S. president, first of all, it's very embarrassing that our leaders are doing these rounds, going to Europe and China and Russia, which is part of Europe, and then they're in Paris today, then in London the other day, they are in Moscow, and then they're in Washington. They are pandering to the highest bidder, which technically means they're mortgaging the continent. It's very embarrassing. I argue in my piece that, and we all know this, we live on the richest continent on the planet. In Europe, they've got no food, they have no minerals. All they have is gotten from elsewhere. They have been plundering the rest of the world for a very long time, right? And we're not going to say they should stop their plunder or they should bring back the bits of their plunder. I'm not part of that narrative. What I'm saying is that in the moment we live in now, we have so much power in our hands. There's so much power in our hands, which requires people to be willing to take risk. Why would a rich person go to the poorer to negotiate terms of engagement? It doesn't make sense to me. Because in our different nation states, 49 people attended the summit in Washington. Why are we lumped together to appear in Washington? Why are we lumped together? Because clearly these folks see us as a continent, as a continent for extraction. So they can mobilize all these children in Africa. They will come to Washington, they will come to Moscow, they will come to Beijing, and you can tell them what you want. Right? That should be embarrassing to an African. A bit of pride in there. I mean, we fought for independence. The Kenyan struggle for independence is very vivid in our mind. For that, you would think that African presidents should have the independence of thought to say, well, you guys want to take our resources, you want to benefit from our resources, you need to come to us. Because as you know, 70% of the things, including the food and other items that are used in Europe and North America, they don't come from America, right? The coffee that is consumed in every corner in Europe is from Ethiopia, Kenya, Uganda, in these countries. So why should we not have the pride to say, let those who want to engage with us come to us, but not us to walk there? The point that becomes very clear there is that our leaders are lacking in self-esteem. They're like little children, right? They bully the people that they govern, but they're like little children. They're lacking in esteem. When Big Brother calls and asks, "Can you jump?" They ask, "How high can you jump?" You saw the embarrassment in London when they went for the burial of their former colonizer, right? They were being bussed around London like school children. They've got no pride. So that's what I find embarrassing for me when you talk about independence. That's what I find embarrassing, that, we have power in our hands. Why don't we use that power? This is why, you could call me weird. That's why I mourn the death of John Pombe Magufuli with all my heart. Because this man said if we have the mantra of African solution to African problems, then we should walk the mantra, right? This is why you could call me weird again. This is why I still struggle to understand the West's problem with Isaias Afwerki, the man of Eritrea, who was not invited, right? But if you think the way I think, you realize that men like him, the guy in Cuba, Fidel Castro's entire time in Cuba, Hugo Chavez's entire time in Venezuela, all these places, these have been axes of resistance. These axes of resistance of Western exploitation are a big deal, and I think this gives me pride. We were witnessing. I hope I can make a comment on Ethiopia without landing in trouble. We were witnessing the war in Ethiopia. One of the things, if you listen to Prime Minister Meles speak over and over again, the West was often asking him to open up the Ethiopian economy to them. And Meles often argued, if big banks can wreck the economy of the USA, if big banks can wreck the economy of Great Britain, how about my country? Why would I allow them to come and operate here? They will do whatever they want in this space. So the Ethiopian economy to this day remains closed to a particular degree, close to Western capital. And I guarantee you, Europe and North America, those big capitals, London, Paris, New York, Washington, are not happy with the ways in which things are happening in Ethiopia, right? So it's those moments where you feel proud that a man realizes, that an African leader realizes that they have so much and they're ready to protect it with all their hearts. I write in this article, for example, that if the United States government is fighting China to protect Apple, is fighting Huawei to protect Apple and Microsoft, why is it so easy for us to hand over our resources to the Western world? If you realize, you guys, can I take breaks so I can carry on?
No, you
Hello?
can carry on. You can carry on.
I can carry on because I want to give the example of DRC and
Sure.
Zambia. Yeah. So Secretary Blinken is speaking, and the first thing he says, he realizes that the world needs resources that are in Ethiopia and in Zambia, especially copper and cobalt, because they're very necessary in the manufacture of electric vehicles. And in the language of climate change, in the language of saving the environment, we are going electric. We're going to be manufacturing electric vehicles. But then they said they're entering an MOU, opening up so that it's easy for companies to open manufacturing lines in Zambia and DRC, which technically meant you're handing over these minerals to American companies. Because if you're open, you'd have to enter an MOU, because the current regime of business engagement, which is like a neoliberal order, ably enables players from wherever they are, as long as they come with money, the intention to invest from wherever they are, be it Beijing or Moscow, to invest in DRC. But when you enter an MOU with a specific country, it means you're making the resources an exclusive, you're giving this country exclusive access to those resources. And that's the agreement that Tshisekedi and I cannot have to pronounce the name of the Zambian president, that the MOU they entered with Secretary Blinken. Why would they do that? It bothers me. Why would they do that? Why not simply open up the economy to whoever you're ready to give them a good rate on their natural resource, right? One of the things that I've learned that I've not just learned it, but one of the things that has become clearer in the Russian-Ukraine conflict, it's become clearer that countries need to develop their resources. That countries don't need foreigners. Whatever the name you're going to give them, investors, foreign direct investments, whatever you're going to call them, you need to develop your resources as a country. You need to develop your resources as a country. This is why Iran has been able to withstand resistance. This is why countries in the Middle East are exploiting their oil. They don't have foreign companies, they have national companies. This is why Libya was the richest country on the continent without debt, with the highest literacy rate across the entire continent, because they had oil. Libya, a national company. You have Qatar Oil. You have companies. Natural resources are exploited by companies owned by the state. Think about Gazprom. If Gazprom was owned by a foreign company, by, say, a major company coming from London, Russia will be kicked back to the Stone Age. But because Gazprom is a company owned by the state of Russia, Russia still has leverage, right, in this conflict, because it can still dictate the terms of selling its oil. Right? Now, in the midst of all this, because these guys are not our friends, it's just their interests. In the midst of all this, we are handing over our cash cows, our major resources, to things under the language of direct foreign investment. Who bewitched us as a continent? Why are we so blind? Why can't we see that? This is a story. Maybe you guys are aware of it. This is a story which was published in The Economist. Banks in Africa are the most profitable in the world, while being the least efficient. They are the most profitable in the world, right? This includes banks in Kenya, in Uganda, in Tanzania, in certain places where foreign banks operate. They are the most profitable in the world. And as you know, economies everywhere, economies thrive on banking. A banking regime sets the language of business for a very tiny business or for a big business, right? Now, as you know, guys, interest rates across Africa range between 15 to 27%. Where in the
Yusuf,
world? Yeah,
sorry, I have just one question before you
yeah,
proceed.
yeah,
I've read your article and it's really insightful. And I just
yeah,
wanted to ask one question. Do
yeah.
you think there's a silent war between China and the US?
A silent war. It's
Yes.
open. It's an open war. It's not silent. It's open because in the 1980s, uh, the Washington Consensus forced African governments to open up their economies. Right, African governments, 30 years right after independence, they didn't have rich people, neither did they have the experience to run big things such as railways, big banks, uh, electricity distribution companies. We didn't have rich people or people with the experience to run these things. This is 30 years after independence. We are just beginning to emerge from the shadows of independence. But Washington wasn't happy. The former colonizers weren't happy at all because they gave us independence 1960, 1950. And then 30 years later, 1980, they were back teaching us how to run our economies. And they didn't just teach us, they forced us that we should privatize, run your economies as private businesses. Right? This is just 30 years after colonialism. 30 years. Right? If you come to Kampala right now, this is 2020, there are graveyards in Kampala, which is the capital city. There are banana plantations in Kampala, which is the capital city. Right? So think about 1980, and they are harassing us to open up our economies to business, so that close Uganda hotels and make it a business of a person. Somebody should buy Uganda hotels and run it. Uganda really should be bought by a person so that they can run. The argument was that make it more efficient. So 30 years after independence, during that time, all our economies on the African continent were in consensus that we don't have the wherewithal, we don't have the intellectual tools, neither do we have the material tools to run these projects, which are very beneficial to the country as private business. We don't have those people. But, we were under the compulsion of the New World Order. I mean, the Cold War just ended. And, we opened up our economies. So most of the sectors were just ruined, and some others, which were major interest, were taken over by foreigners, right? Now, that became the New World Order. Now, China and some other countries in East Asia just refused to take this Washington Consensus nonsense. They didn't take it. They just turned it down completely. They argued and they withstood their position. Now, China, 30 years of growth, a major industrial manufacturing space because of its population and many other factors, has so much money. They are riding on the regime that was created by Washington, the free market order, which was created by Washington. Now China is an equal player with the same might, right? And because it's a very selfish regime that was created by Washington, China exploits its advantage. And because of that, the war is not just silent; the war is actually open. You remember the arrest of the vice chair of Huawei? I don't know if it was either arrested in Paris or in the US. And this happened, I think, in 2018. Earlier in 2005 and 15, Huawei had just won a major business to install 5G across London, right? And as you know, and you guys know because you're using swankier phones than mine, Huawei manufactures better gadgets than Apple, right? Because Apple, after making this equipment, they take it to China for production, and the Chinese are not dumb. You take the technology, you make it better, right? They've done this like over a period. Now they can produce better equipment. They've gone 5G before the rest of the world would actually master the scale. And the war is open. The war is very open. This is why you will hear, Chinese companies in trouble this, in trouble that, in trouble this, and their CEO arrested here, sanctioned this. This war is very open.
Just a bit,
Yeah.
Yusuf. With that war being open and the US now calling back Africa for this whole summit, do you think how does it affect Africa? Because the US now wants to come back in Africa and invest and all that stuff, which China has already been doing, as you rightly write in your article. How does this affect Africa moving forward? The US and China having that war that they're having, and both of them trying to now probably compete in terms of investing in Africa. Is it a
Are you waiting for my response? Can somebody talk back? Yeah, it was. I'll go back to the words of Prime Minister Meles Zenawi. I think in 2012, the year in which he died, the what is it called? The World Economic Forum was being held in Addis Ababa, and Meles Zenawi said that he's always taking loans from banks, but he takes loans from banks which are less speculative. And then he said, "Of course, I take them from China, right?" So, if we were very tactical enough as the African continent, if we're smart enough, I think we could benefit from this regime, from this competition between China and the United States. But we're not smart enough, as you've realized, we are being bussed around major cities, like little school children. We're not smart enough. Our leadership over the period has become more comprador, as Frantz Fanon prophesied in the 1960s. They are content to be richer than their poorer compatriots, right? Does that make sense? Our poor African leaders are content to be richer, to be less poor than their poorer compatriots. They govern, right? Because I can give you an example. If you hear, for example, that the US has promised to give $100 billion in security financing to the African continent, $100 billion, right? It sounds like a lot of money, but that money is very small, like super small, because a recent study indicated that between 1960 and 2010, I start with this, my peep. Between 1960 and 2010, Africa lost $162 trillion in unequal exchange. 152 trillion dollars. To put that figure in perspective, the US economy is $25 trillion, right? Between 1960 and 2010, we lost $152 trillion, right? Now, if the US president announces giving $10 billion to Africa in security financing, that's peanuts, absolute peanuts. Now, consider this. A single African leader from, say, the $100 billion could take $1 million, $1 million US dollar, right? That for a single individual is a lot of money. I guarantee you, it's a lot of money. Now, that African leader will be very happy. $1 million is a lot of money for any single person living wherever, whether you live the most expensive life as the rich people of the US, whether you live here, $1 million is a lot. Now, if you give that money to a single African leader, he will sign a contract which hands over Mombasa harbors to a foreign company for 100 years because he was given $1 million. Now, he signed off the entire country. He signed off part of the $1 trillion that we lost between 1960 and 2010. He signed off in exchange for peanuts. Now, consider his life. A man like that will be driving a Range Rover, maybe a Land Cruiser SUV. He'll have a mansion. If they love women, they could have like 10 concubines. They'll be living a life which is beautiful. But at what expense? Now, that's the African condition. That is the African condition. We have men and women in this position who are content to sign off big investment projects because they are blind to how much they cost for peanuts which make them appear less poor than their exploited compatriots. Right? So that's the African condition. To go back to your question, I would say we aren't smart enough. Right? We are so dumb. I mean, it's very existent. You can see this from our leaders. We are so dumb that we are over and over again signing off major investments. I should tell you, you guys follow the story in South Sudan and Glencore, the Glencore executives? The Glencore executives, a week after South Sudan got independence, flew into Khartoum with money to enter into hitherto negotiated oil agreements so that they can take this money. You know how much they were flying into South Sudan with? Guys, do you guys have an idea how much it was?
No, we don't.
$200,000.
That's
Just
crazy.
$200,000. It's crazy. Then this is recently concluded. A court in London about a month ago, where a case was running, the Glencore executive pleaded guilty, and they said, among other things, they said they sought to benefit from conflict. This is written in Bloomberg. It was carried in the Guardian too. They said they sought to benefit from conflict, and this is in their guilty plea. Right? So they flew into South Sudan to benefit from oil contracts, and you know how much they were flying in with private jets? $200,000. Right? And then later, the money, of course, quantified over a period, became $25 million. Right? But what is that? What is $25 million being given to a few South Sudan elites at the expense
Yusuf,
of signing off entire generations? Yeah? I'm right here.
Yeah, thank you. Guys, you can join the conversation. You can request to speak or ask something as the conversation goes on. But back to Yusuf. When you talk about that, it reminds me of something. We usually see our opposition leaders, not just in Uganda, not just in Kenya, but across Africa. They run to US and these other Western powers, usually, human right calls and all these kind of calls that go on. Last month, seeing our leaders now, 49 of them, and they are shaking hands with Biden and all these, guys in the US. What's really going on? Because one hand, these guys make it like the alternative to report to or to call out for help is these guys, the Western powers, the US and all that. But these same guys are shaking hands and making deals with the current regimes in power and making such big money deals like the ones you've explained. So what's really the game here? And where should Africans really turn to?
They should turn to themselves. They should turn to themselves. I will return to the Meles example. When Meles was responding to a question about why is he not liberalizing, he said, we've liberalized our economies, right? We've liberalized our economies to local capitalists, but we've not offered it to foreign capitalists. So when you go to Ethiopia, the telecommunication companies are all locally owned. They should turn to themselves. UTL in Uganda is struggling, but MTN and Airtel are thriving on UTL masts. Well, they've been able to construct some new ones nowadays, but they built their profile thriving on Uganda telecommunication masts. Why is UTL struggling? Because you open the market and then MTN and Airtel moved in with big money, and they can also buy executives in UTL not to market UTL well. And now you know how much money they take out of the country every day. You know how much money telecommunication companies take out of Uganda on a daily. Should I give you some mathematics on it?
Please do.
Turn to themselves. I should give you an example. There's a thing called Paka Last in Uganda, which is like you're paying 1,000 Uganda shillings every morning. Now, 1,000 Uganda shillings is very small, and anybody can pay it. So if you have a telecommunication market of 22 million people, so give Airtel maybe 20 million. Give Airtel not half 11 million. Maybe that's too high. Give them 5 million. Maybe 5 million is too high. Give them 2.5. So imagine 2.5 million people every morning wake up and load their Airtel accounts 1,000. How much when I talk about every morning? You think about 2.5 billion, right? So you give 2.5 billion every morning to Airtel. Every morning you give this money to Airtel. Over a period of 30 days, how much have you given to Airtel? And what running costs are they doing? The masts are already up running. All this money is taken out of the economy. It's a lot, because if you're giving 3 billion to a telecommunication company every morning, you basically give them 90 billion a month. And I've given you the lowest market share. If the market is 20 million, I've given you 2.5. Then you can add all the other costs. Why is this company foreign? Because if it were owned by a man who has an address in Masaka, when he makes these profits, he'll be thinking about developing Masaka. Right? I've often told my listeners that, Ugandans support the Premier League. The only problem, they can't sit in the stands in London to watch these games, because Barclays Bank, which is the biggest sponsor of Premier League, makes it most money in Africa, in East Africa, in Kenya and Uganda. Right? So they make their money here and they go and invest it in the Premier League. So basically, the money used in the Premier League is sweat of Ugandans, Kenyans, and all the other Africans. Right? Because it's sponsored by the Barclays Premiership, and Barclays made its money from here. Because the economist told you the most profitable banks are here. Right? So the point I'm making, where should they turn to? They should turn to themselves. Uganda was debating coffee. DRC gave its minerals to Glencore and Dan Gutler International. Dan Gutler is an Israeli company, which among the richest companies in Israel, makes its money from DRC. Right? We have a Pineti deal. Who do you think is going to be benefiting from the coffee deal? Because we gave our coffee to foreign companies a long time ago, and now all we're doing is allowing foreigners to compete amongst each other, and then we hand over the equipment to one other foreigner company. In 2019, I think 2016, the Kenyan government wanted to rein in on banks. Reining on banks so that banks can give a fair interest rate. In Europe and North America, interest rates average at 1.5%. If you're doing interest rates here at 2.27, 35, what type of business are you going to do? So why do African leaders have to turn to their former colonizers, who are now colonizing them at the same time? Why don't they turn to themselves? I can guarantee you, when you ever see an African leader being maligned and called names as autocrat, as this and that, as barbaric, as this and that, that leader's on the right thing. That's the thing with Muammar Gaddafi. That's the thing with what's his name, Robert Mugabe, because Robert Mugabe had even been knighted by the Queen of England, and then when he turned to saying, "Oh, look, people, we need to have land, given back to this land which is so violently taken, into have land gotten back to Zimbabweans," the knighthood was taken away, and Western media houses competed with each other in maligning Robert Mugabe. Right? When you see an African leader being maligned for sport, that leader's on the right thing. This is the thing we had with Pombe Magufuli under the COVID-19 pandemic. Pombe Magufuli just said, we will have African solutions to this pandemic. Right? Other countries overdid themselves because they wanted money. Every time you see an African leader being maligned for sport, that leader is working for the national. You Ugandans know, the man who liberated Ugandans from the backwaters of the economy was Idi Amin. Many of you, I can guarantee you, many people in this space still think Idi Amin was the worst thing to ever happen to this country. But I can guarantee you, the best ever there was, and perhaps there will be, was Idi Amin. But then they manufacture a narrative, they force down our throats, they give us a leader who will perpetuate the narrative. All right? And then, we have people amongst ourselves, elite, very well educated, but into the colonial modernity, that they are handmaidens in their own exploitation. Right? So to return to the question, if you ask me, where should our opposition leaders and mainstream leaders turn? They should turn to themselves. Can I hear somebody speak back to me? Hello?
Yeah, I get you. Someone is requesting to speak, but as he comes on to speak, My question to you, Yusuf, from what you've shared from your article, what then is the way forward? What does the summit is done? The money has been pledged. We've also seen other summits. We saw one in China, one in Russia. African leaders are called and they go, they gather. But moving forward,
Right. Yeah.
for a guy, you know, a young graduate, for example, trying to hustle his way through, you know, down here in East Africa, what does what does the weight of this summit mean to them? And moving forward as Africa, what is this going to mean to us?
I mean, I could paint a grim picture, and then also, perhaps possible we need to understand uh, the technology of new colonialism, right? And I think spaces like this will enable us to constantly return to the question of new colonialism, right? I'll be publishing a book, I think, this year, where I talk about new colonialism. I've written a series of essays, and all I'm doing is to make visible the new ways we are being controlled. And I think we've been surrounded. We've been surrounded in ways that are so massive that the new technology of colonialism is that it's invisible, right? You don't see colonialism around you. You don't see it. You don't see it. In fact, in many cases, it even feels good. It feels good. I can give you an example. Um, in 2020, there were over 1.6 million students in Europe coming from the rest of the world. 1.6 million students. 1.6, 1.2. The figure is about over 1 million. I can't remember. I think it's 1.2 or 1.6 students in Europe. Now, these students are on scholarships, right? The Western world is competing with itself to give scholarships to the most brilliant students on the African continent, in Southeast Asia, in Latin America, to go and study in Europe. It feels good or not? You get a scholarship, you study for free, you access the best education. Now, when you come back to the country, sometimes you come back to the country, sometimes many of our friends who go to study never come back. So when you don't come back, you give your intellectual labors to the country that gave you a scholarship. You forget about your country. If you come back, you are a friend of the country that gave you education. So which means in your way of thought, you have been conscripted to your colonizer. You feel like you're part of your benefactor who gave you a scholarship to study in Europe. So if you get a deal, if you ever become maybe a permanent secretary, maybe a minister or a mainstream politician, if you ever become one of those things, if you're negotiating a deal and Russia comes with a good deal, but your scholarship is from Germany, who do you think you're going to side with? Right? Even if the Germans are giving you a bad deal, you consider them your friends because they benefited you with a scholarship. So you're going to sign the contract with them even if it's a bad deal. And they'll persuade you that Russia is potentially going to colonize you in future. Well, they colonized you and they're still colonizing, but they'll tell you, be afraid of Russia because it has colonial ambitions, right? You could say, oh, do you know you're actually colonizing right now? Or you actually my former colonizer? You're like, well, we are former colonizers, but we are good. Russia has ambitions. It's going to colonize you and be worried. Well, we're still colonizing you, but well, Russia has ambitions too. So what happens in the end? In the end, you end up entering contract with a bad deal. We have people signing off contracts with countries such as America because America offered them a trip to New York to meet with the world leaders. We have folks like that in very influential positions. So they are surrounded. They're surrounded that it's difficult to get out. I keep saying that while our former colonizers were wearing khakis and carried rifles, our new colonizer is wearing a suit and he will shake hands with you and he will smile and they speak good English and they're friendly. We sit with them on the same table. There is no white-only neighborhoods anymore. Right? There are no white-only neighborhoods. There are no white-only swimming pools, no white-only restaurants. They're not there. You'll not find a signpost saying white-only. So what they've done is to invisibilize themselves. They are invisible. You can't see them. We live with them. We even marry from them. They even marry from us, but they colonize us and they look good. So one of the things we need to do is, despite all this sort of fine mesh around us, is we need to make visible the new technology of colonialism, to know that even when they benefit with a scholarship, please know that first of all, they ruined your education. They ruined your education so they can give you a scholarship. Right? They're not doing a favor. It's part of the technology. If you guys are my readers, I've been very bitter with people in the NGO sector, right? In the energy and CEO sector.
Yeah,
So they
yeah,
spend
I've
their
seen
time.
that. I've seen
Yeah,
that.
yeah. They spend endless hours. And by the way, I should tell you, whoever's in the NGO sector or in the CEO sector is a very smart person. Our smartest elite on the African continent are in the NGO sector, but they're not in the mainstream politics because they think mainstream politics is dirty. So they think they can contribute through the NGO sector. So if you ask my friends in the NGO sector, for the last 30 years we've been doing this work, what has changed? You have NGOs which are meant to foster democratic inclusion, and they're working in Uganda. And you ask them, what has been your contribution for the last 30 years? Has democracy gotten better? No, but the offices are still open. You ask NGOs involved in public health. You ask them, what has happened over the last 30 years? We're doing this. What has gotten better? Is public health better? No. But they are still writing proposals and getting funded by USAID, DGF, GIZ. They're still getting funding to do things such as democracy, human rights. They're getting funding. The funder knows you're going to eat this money for your personal benefit, but it's okay because you are the elite. Once I benefit you, I buy your silence and your accomplice. I shut your mouth and I make you my friend. So if I give you $1 million, well, $1 million, not maybe a lot, they never get that much money. If you write a proposal to USAID and USAID pays you, gives you a grant of say $200,000, they know for the work you spelled out in your proposal, you're going to spend maybe 100,000, and the 100,000 is going to go for your private means. You're going to buy a car, your office is going to look good, you're going to take another wife, you're going to do all the nice things that you always wanted to do. They know it. They know it. This is why even when they cry, oh, corruption is so rife in the NGO sector, they still give the money because they know it's okay. So once they know you're spending technology, you're going to use 100% for the actual work you spelled out in the proposal, and you'll eat the other 100, which is okay. But after you've eaten that money, you're going to be silent, and you'll be our friend. And in the fact, as you drive over Kampala's potholed roads, because you're driving a big SUV and you're shopping in Game and Nakumat and in Buchumi, all these on beach clothes and all these major supermarkets, you don't feel the rugged lives of your compatriots. So you can't protest. You can't raise their consciousness, right? That's how you buy our elite. Our elite are bought off through the technology of the NGO sector. And they think they're doing so much work. If you go around Kamocha Street, where most of the offices are, they're really convinced their work is very valuable. They think their work is really valuable, but no, it's valuable to the colonizer because you do so many things. Something such as public health, right? If you consider public health is the work of the government. There's no private player with money enough to fund Mlago Hospital. That person is not there. It's the work of the government. But how do you make sure the people whose economy will ruin, that is so poor they can't fund their hospital? How do you buy the silence of the elite? Create a thing called the NGO sector, where you channel money into the hands of the elite. You channel some peanuts in the hands of the elite. In their content, they're silent, they become your friend.
Yusuf, there's someone that has a question for you. I think Tony.
Yeah.
Tony, if you can hear me, you can speak.
Hey, okay, please. Thank you, Kazini. I'm happy with you, to be listening to you, Dr. Yusuf. I think you've said everything. You've put it right. I was looking at the topic today. What does the US African Summit of 2022 mean to the future of Africa? And I was really asking myself, what would it really mean to the future of Africa? Before I submit anything further or later, I'll just put one question to you. Maybe that you'll answer, then maybe I'll come back later. One question is just change your perspective of how we're looking at it. What are the vulnerabilities of Western society without Africa? What are the vulnerabilities of these Western societies or countries without Africa? And then the second one would be, and you've talked about something that you're going to write about it, but I'd already written this question, is, have we looked at the ways that these Western countries are marginalizing the African culture, economy, and society? And I believe this is what has led us to this point, because everything we're talking about can be actually be talked about in one or two of these questions. Thank you. Over
thank
to
you very much,
please.
Tony. Thank you very much, Tony. I mean, I'm sure you're aware that Europe is a very poor continent, right? So it's very poor, and they've made the continent by pillaging the rest of the world, right? The UK was able to build London from oil stolen in Iran with the Anglo-American. If you read all the Shah's men, the conflicts between 1907, when oil was discovered in Iran, it was exploited up to 1954. Yeah. I'm sorry, I got interrupted a bit. Between 1907 was oil was discovered in Iran, and 1953 the money was being taken from Iran by Anglo-American, rather Anglo-Iranian, which is now called British Petroleum, and it was that money that was used to build what is now called the UK. Right? This is not me speaking. I mean, it's been admitted by successive British leaders that without Iran, we would be a third world country. On her part, France to this day, through the CFA, still colonizes 15 African countries. Right? You need to read the book by Simba Sali and I think Fanny Pigaud. These are two actors who recently published a book which is called the CFA, The Story, The Last Colonial Currency. So through a colonial currency, France has continued to pillage 15 African countries. Right? So this is a very poor continent, I can tell you. It's a very poor continent. And the only way, it needs Africa for its survival. It needs us. It needs the rest of the world for its survival. So I don't know if I understood the question of vulnerability, but I think later you said why they need us to survive. How are they vulnerable? They are vulnerable because they've constructed a regime which you can exploit, in which we can also have safeguard. All we need is if we had leaders who could stand up and say, this is not going to happen. We can't open up our economies and our resources and all these things to you on the cheap, right? It has been our inability to have leaders who could stand up that, we've been exploited for cheap. All right, I hope I answered the question, but also you got to understand that, every time a leader has stood up to say we can't allow continued Western exploitation, every time a leader has stood up, that leader has been taken out. From Muammar Gaddafi to Patrice Lumumba, or from Patrice Lumumba to Muammar Gaddafi, to the attack on Idi Amin here in Uganda, the relentless attack on Robert Mugabe till he died, the relentless attack on Isaiah Afwerki, the attack on Meles Zenawi for the entire time he was president, who was prime minister of Ethiopia. So every time a leader stands up and says we can't open up our economies, or recently, by the way, if you really followed closely, many of my friends in Ethiopia might disagree. Partly the war in Ethiopia is because, Ethiopia still refuses to open up the economy to Western multinationals, right? So they are vulnerable in that sense that they need us for their survival. But also we've been so vulnerable in the sense that, every time somebody comes up, they easily take them out. But also we've been unable to stand up. For example, let me give you, this is a very nice example. They have a thing called democracy. If African countries, to some degree, lived by the mantra that leaders change terms, right? And you hold power for 5 years, like John Paul Magufuli did in Tanzania, and you leave after 5 years, you bring a new guy, somebody new comes in. By the time that somebody moves out after 5 years, a lot has changed. So they can't, like smart people can't take this person out. The problem we have many places on the African continent is that leaders just choose to overstay. And when you overstay, you become useful as a colonial tool. That's what happened in Uganda. It's happened in DRC when you had a guy who overstayed. This guys ably gave over the economy to Israeli multinationals. I hope I'm not taking long answering this question. Because I can talk about this more and more. Can someone talk back to me, please? Hello?
Yeah, yes, please, yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
thanks for the answer.
no problem. I think I think you're answering this question. I think we have 10 minutes. I think 30 minutes to go. So yeah, we are good. Tony, you were saying something?
Yes, I was saying something, and I believe everything that Dr. Yusuf is saying is very okay. And why I exactly put the question of vulnerabilities to him is allow me, it's form of questions, but it's discussion on top of what he has already discussed. I'm Kitu Tony. I am a student of architecture. Actually, I'm a graduate architect. And at a certain point in my study, I landed on the study of a period in history, which is basically the Renaissance period. It was kind of a rebirth in both political, economic, and cultural times of this world. And I believe everything that is happening today, most of the ideas from the Western world, brilliant ideas, were cooked up in that era because they realized their weaknesses, what they did not have, and what other people, what other countries, or what other land around the world had, and they felt they needed to be great. So they had to organize and sit with some of their best minds and see how they could control resources all over the world to see that they can build their agendas and be able to stay up front. So if sometimes you can always hear about something called the humanitarian agenda, which is always the agenda that we Africans look at as like it's a hand of help that is coming to us to help us. But behind that agenda is everything that the Western world wants to pick from us. So when you talk about the vulnerabilities that you're talking about, one of the things that you would look at is the policies that they always bring to us. There is nothing that a European country, a Western country, will bring to a country to enforce it if they are not going to benefit from it in the long run, and if it doesn't support its agenda. And it's fair to say. It is still in through the same policies that have been used to marginalize our African society. Just as Doctor was saying that our leaders have lost the self-esteem. They cannot stand. And why can't they stand? It is because over time, the policies that these countries have been pushing towards us have led to the marginalization, not only in mind, but the entire society. You really feel like what we have as, understanding and the pride we have as Africans on how we would have done our things, the integrity we have on how we do our things, we feel it's not important. It cannot match up to what the Western world is giving. So what would you expect them to do? And then the question would be, why do they keep doing this? Why do they keep calling? Because I think this is the second African summit since the one before in Obama's era. Why would they gather all these presidents, put them in one place and start talking about the summit? you should take time to I think go through the speeches of the summit. But I think on the first day of the summit, they discussed something like civil society issues, what Doctor was still talking about. Still one of the arms through which they have used to come and weaken us. Second thing is business cooperation and business cooperation council. How are businesses being conducted? How are they going to benefit? In a way, they are trying to act like they're trying to invite us into their, into the business world. Are you going to get big ideas? Which companies can you get into your country? So then especially the third day is partnering on the agenda 2063. Now, the agenda 2063, do you really think that the African leaders who left Africa when they were going for the summit really knew about this agenda 2063 of the US summit? And why are they bringing it up when they are bringing the African leaders? They are simply already buying you into an agenda which they have already planned. So it's going to take time. This is in conclusion. It's going to take time for us as young people to realize, restudy. You don't need to read a lot of material. Most of the things are open to us. If you learn something, the question between arts and sciences is another question which actually Doctor talked about. And if you look at it critically, the day you'll understand that the science and the arts are equally the same, if you go and study the Soviet Union and you understand how people were reasoning, it's the same application. Sciences only come to help in problem solving. But however, world leadership and growth of countries and growth of societies are all based on arts. And these arts are the ones which give the basis of research and growth of technology. Thank you. Over to you, please.
Thank you so much. Just some more. There's Peter. I think we can have Peter. Then we shall have Doctor, and then Doctor will conclude. Peter, you want to say something?
Thank you. I wanted to ask a question to Mr. Yusuf. I was asking, what can we do as the people in Africa, apart from the leaders? What can we do so that we cannot be manipulated into serving the Western world agenda? Thank you.
Dr. Yusuf, we're inviting you back if you can hear. I don't know if you've had Peter's question.
First I want to thank Tony for a very brilliant submission. I agree 110% that it's the social sciences, it's the political sciences and the culture sciences that really drive the world, right? Thinking is a core part of growth. A doctor needs to have an ideology. An engineer has to have a method of thinking about a road, right? And it's not provided in engineering, but it's provided in the social, culture, and political sciences, right? So I think that was a very brilliant submission. Thank you very much. And Peter, the question is what we can do. I keep saying we got to be aware, right? We need to be aware because right now we are in a knowledge competition. One of the biggest colonialisms is the colonialism of the mind. There's a conscious effort to control the mind of the African, right? I think we need to work on our mind a great deal. A great deal.
They're struggling. But there is one moment that comes in life.
Hello? I had somebody speak.
No. Sorry, please go on.
Yeah. I was just saying that the biggest colonialism is the colonization of the mind. That we've forgotten so much that like the point I made earlier, that why don't you look at ourselves? If you would ask Mr. Museveni, if you're giving a coffee deal, why don't you look at the coffee farmers in Uganda? Why don't you look at a coffee farmer who supports the NRM? And if you saw political benefit, why didn't you support a coffee farmer who is a die-hard NRM activist? Why didn't you give him this deal so that if he makes these humongous profits, he would develop Rashtura or Chiruhura or Mara or Kunjo, wherever they come from? Why do you give it a foreigner? Why didn't you allow indigenous banks to grow? I don't like, you guys know Sudhir Pereira, you know, people here know Sudhir,
Yeah.
host.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, so he's not like a very honest businessman, right? He's not a clean guy. He's a thief, but he's a local thief, right? Why would you close his bank? Why would you close? Because if you watch Sudhir's story, every time he felt he made much more money, he extended banking services to a small town. Every time he felt that he has made so much money, he thought about Uganda as home. So if he could steal so much, he had nowhere to take it but Uganda. This is why you could have a footprint of his investment, right? But you can't find footprints of Absa, Stanchart. You can't find the footprint of the investment, but they're making humongous profits. Even in the era of COVID-19, where there's a total lockdown, those banks made billions of shillings. So the question, why don't we look internally, right? So, but the idea for you to feel as an African, you have to look internally. You have to be aware. You have to have consciousness raised. Let's be aware. Let's raise our levels of curiosity. I know the education system has handicapped us a great deal. We are extremely handicapped because things like history and civics and political education have all been taken out from the curriculums. They're not there anymore, right? So we're not raising civically conscious publics. We have publics which, take political education. We read political education in schools. There's something called civics in schools. You remember that, people? They took a graduate tax. Graduate tax made us aware of where our monies were going. Bimeza were outlawed. Bimeza made us aware of if you can't read these popular barazas, and Bimeza made political education easily accessible, all these things were taken away. So the African is left in a difficult condition where he has to find knowledge to be aware. So for us, if you've been lucky enough to have your brain opened by some incident or some event, continuously raise awareness. And among other things, speak about people looking internally, right? Why don't you buy your UTL lines, people? Right? Why don't you have our UTL lines, right? You could ask such a very stupid question. Why don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because, we've been deprived of the awareness that we need to look internally. We are profiting these multinationals in very humongous ways because, they first of all conspired with our governments, and in the same way, if you look at the debate which is ongoing in Kenya right now, the GMO conversation, it's another technology of colonial control, and the GMO conversation now happening in Kenya, and the elite in Kenya are starting to feel comfortable with GMOs or what GMOs do. By the way, I should tell you, this is a very serious thing on the African, how colonial it is. I remember, I think it must have been like 2013. There was a professor at Makerere University who was very critical of GMOs in Uganda, right? And I found a story in the newspapers where the leaders of GMOs in Uganda were petitioning Makerere University to sack this professor for being critical of GMOs, right? And I couldn't believe my eyes reading the story, because how powerful could they be that foreign companies even come here and they start policing our intellectual power to the level of policing a professor at Makerere University? Take the other example. COVID-19 hit us hard. There was a thing called COVIDX. I had many seemingly smart people sound skeptical about COVIDX. Why were they not skeptical about? And I know these people are always eating grasses, and they grew up eating grasses, and they eat milondo for their sexual power, and they all do things. They're very critical of COVIDX. They've never been critical of milondo. They've never been critical of mululuza. These grasses they squeeze in their palms and swallow them when they have complications. You know, why? Why is this? Why? Well, we are witnessing media reporting that there's a surge of COVID-19 again in China, but we have not given any attention to say mass production of Covidex. Yet we know Covidex saved lives. So I'm saying, I mean, the long and short of that question, I'm sorry I went in for too long, is that conscious awareness, raising consciousness is a big deal. If as an African, just beware that you're surrounded.
Thank you, Dr. Yusuf. So, Dr. Yusuf, I'll just ask 3 last questions, just to pick your quick thoughts. The first question is, in your work as Dr. Yusuf Serunkuma, what impact do you want?
Are you comfortable? Are you comfortable just saying in my work as Yusuf Serunkuma? Are you comfortable saying that?
Okay, sure, no problem. Okay, my question is, what impact do you want to be most remembered for?
Oh my God, I'm still young. Why do you want me to die? What are you saying I'll be remembered for?
No. Like I'm saying, no.
I've never been about religious there. Wait, come on, man. I've never been
I know you're still young.
I have things to do.
I know you're still young, but
I don't know what I'm supposed to be remembered for is in future. I've not done it yet, and I even don't know it.
Okay, fine, good. But I was asking that because sure, there are a number of so many young people that do look up to you and are inspired by your work. But it's fine. I'll just move on to my next question. Usually on the space, we like to celebrate Africans moving Africa. From where you sit, who's that one African, could be a Ugandan, East African, or African on the continent that you feel is moving Africa? They're doing great work in their industry or in their field. Who do you celebrate? Just one name.
Can you say that question again? I didn't hear it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is here on the space, we have a question we always ask our speakers. We like to celebrate Africans moving Africa. So from where you sit, who's that one African, could be East African or anywhere from the continent, that you feel moving Africa through their work, in their industry? Just one name. Who do you celebrate?
I mean, you should have warned me early enough that I need to think about that. You should have warned me early enough.
Okay, good. Okay.
I don't know, man.
Okay,
yeah, I'm inspired by so many people. I love so many people. I see so many people doing wonderful things. And when you ask me that's African, it's a difficult thing to say. And I also I don't like this exceptionalism. Because I want that we move as a collective. So it'll be difficult for me to mention a particular individual. But they're doing different things and different disciplines. You should have warned me early to give it some thought. I could say, I don't know, man. I can't say a name.
Okay, sure, no problem. Okay, my very last question. How can people who are outside Uganda access your books? And how can people also read more of your articles?
So the articles are online. I write in the Observer almost every week. Well, every week I write in the Observer newspaper. The review of African political economy is open. The Pan-African Review is an online publication, right? The books, the website which sells them, Editor House Facility, the publisher has a website and they deliver wherever in the world. There's a local Ugandan shop, online shop, which is like the Ugandan version of Amazon. It's called Mahiri Books. We've sold some of our publications there. So for access, if you go to the Editor House Facility website and you buy a book, wherever you are, that book will be delivered.
Okay, great.
If you buy it from the website, if you go to Mahiri Books is the Ugandan version of Amazon. Mahiri Books delivers across the world, although it includes shipping charges if you're outside of Europe. If you're outside of Uganda, it includes shipping charges depending on where you are. It's something that Amazon does, right?
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, very last question as we close. What advice can you, besides being self-cautious, like you've said, as young Africans, what advice, one last piece of advice you'd give to young Africans growing up in Africa today and how it looks like, and having big hopes of trying to change things from how we see them today? What's the biggest one piece of advice you would give a young African?
I mean, I'm gonna say something, man. You gotta beware that you're surrounded. Whatever you see is not benign. When you're engaging with the rest of the world, they're driven by interests. You gotta beware that what looks nice. My friend Slavoj Žižek said, the smartphone you hold in your hand, the more it is easier to move between the different applications, the more it is controlled by a network of invisible hands which are looking out for themselves. Right? So beware that when you're on TikTok or Twitter or Snapchat or Instagram, the more beautiful the pictures look, the bigger the network that is making sure that your experience is good. But that experience is driven by their own selfish interests. So beware, be curious. There's no free lunch. Just beware. I mean, I'm always constantly saying people have to beware and raise their levels of curiosity and be suspicious and be skeptical. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Yusuf. I think we have just one more person here. I will allow to speak. I hope you'll keep it short, and then we shall wind up and call it a night. Frederick, can you hear me? I think he has gone off again. Okay, Doctor, it's been more than an hour. We thank you so much for your time. It's been incredibly insightful, incredibly impactful. What you've shared, what we've learned, and also really being able to interact from a person and people here who usually read your articles.
So I want to pose a question for the speaker. It's agenda through 2063 is our agenda, is African agenda on your
Did you hear his question?
No, I didn't hear the question. I heard something about Agenda 63, but then I didn't hear what he said after.
I also didn't hear. Frederick, you didn't hear your question. Could you repeat your question? Frederick, if you can hear me, repeat your question.
Frederick, I think it was about, I threw in a comment of, during the US African Summit, there was the call for African countries to support the Agenda 2063, but it was on the agenda of the US African Summit. So I think he's asking, what is the Agenda 2063?
I have no idea. I have no idea what it means.
Okay, I think I think let's just call it a night. I think Frederick can type his question and maybe it will be answered in the comment section. I was thanking you, Doctor, for your time this evening and sharing all you've shared. We're really grateful, and I'm sure everyone on the space that came in and your work, and we can say we commend you for the work that you're doing, especially opening up minds of other Africans. It's really impactful, and we thank you for being with us this night. I think we have no one else trying to speak. I think we shall call it a night. Asante sana, guys. This is a recorded space. If you missed anything earlier on, be sure to listen to the recorded space. It will be on, and we do this every Thursday. If you have to watch out, next Thursday we shall have another space. Our goal is to do 15 impactful spaces, and this is just one of them. Thanks again, everyone, for being part of the space, and thank you so much, Doctor. I think you can give your parting shots if you have any.
Thank you. No, it's been a long talk. I have spoken my lungs out.
Okay,
thank you so much for being
here. Okay, sawa. Guys, thank you. Good night.
Yes,